True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis. Our whole future.
3 minutes ago, the illusion of control shattered. Keir Starmer, who once walked with the confidence of a man untouchable, has just endured what may be remembered as the most humiliating day of his premiership. The press, once his shield, has turned into his executioner. Questions flew like bullets, and Starmer, cornered, rattled, exposed, couldn't escape the truth. This wasn't a stumble. This wasn't a bad headline. This was a knockout blow delivered not by his rivals in Parliament, but by the very media that once carried him to safety. The nation watched as the man who promised stability and strength stood visibly shaken, stuttering through defensive answers, dodging questions, and clinging to a collapsing narrative. Today wasn't just another political setback. It was the day Starmer's carefully constructed mask cracked before the eyes of Britain. Imagine this, a Prime Minister less than a year into power, already drowning in distrust, already struggling to hold together a fractured party, already facing a restless public that no longer believes a word he says. Keir Starmer thought he could charm his way through the storm, thought the press would keep shielding him, thought the Red Wall could still be fooled by polished speeches and staged sincerity. But today, in a room packed with cameras, reporters and sharpened questions, that illusion collapsed. Starmer wasn't just criticised, he was torn apart. The Guardian, Sky News, GB News, outlets across the spectrum lined up to dismantle him in real time. A journalist asked the question that cut deepest. Prime Minister, isn't the real problem that Nigel Farage can talk like a human being while you hide behind talking points and scripted answers? In that moment, the mask slipped. Starmer laughed nervously, muttered some lines about credibility and dodged again. But everyone saw it. He looked like a man cornered, desperate, exposed. Even The Guardian, once a reliable ally, has joined the attack. If the friendliest papers are turning, what hope does he have when the knives from all sides are out? This is no ordinary bad press day. It's the beginning of a shift, a seismic shift in how the establishment seized him. The carefully cultivated image of a man of the people, the calm lawyer turned leader, is collapsing into a picture of weakness and panic. Every dodge, every half answer, every empty slogan only makes him look more disconnected from the very public he claims to serve. His critics don't even have to work hard anymore. Starmer is doing their job for them, undermining his own credibility with every word that leaves his mouth. And what makes it worse is that he doesn't seem to realise it. He keeps repeating Nigel Farage's name over and over, trying to discredit him, but instead he elevates him. Instead of outlining his own vision, Starmer has made Farage the centre of the conversation, handing his rival free publicity and legitimacy. This isn't strategy, this is self-destruction. The press smelled the blood in the water and they struck, and now the headlines write themselves: Starmer rattled, Starmer humiliated, Starmer defeated. The press attack wasn't just fierce, it was coordinated, relentless and devastating. One by one, journalists lined up to expose Keir Starmer's weakness, hammering him with the questions he feared the most. Sky News asked if he was running scared of Reform UK, pointing out that his latest announcements sounded suspiciously similar to Nigel Farage's talking points. GB News mocked the Prime Minister for obsessing over a man with only 5 MPs, while he himself commanded more than 400. And then came the dagger from The Guardian, a paper once so gentle with him that it practically functioned as his cheerleader. They wanted to know whether Starmer even knew how to speak to voters anymore, whether he could connect with ordinary people without sounding like a robot. The message was unmistakable. His protective wall has crumbled. He is no longer being treated as a statesman, he is being treated as prey. Starmer's response to this assault only made things worse. Instead of rising above, instead of shifting the conversation toward his own achievements or vision, he fell straight into the trap. He obsessed over Nigel Farage, mentioning his name again and again until the speech sounded less like a defence of his government and more like an unhinged rant about his rival. Each time he brought up Farage, the press leaned in, sensing his nerves, his panic. It was clear to everyone watching that Farage lives rent-free in Starmer's head. And when a leader appears more consumed with attacking his enemy than defending his own record, the perception of weakness becomes impossible to shake. What followed was even more damaging. Journalists exposed his hypocrisy on economic policy. They reminded him of the promises he made to freeze national insurance and keep the two-child benefit cap. Then they laid out the facts. He raised national insurance on businesses, and now he's considering axing the very cap he swore to protect. How could he stand there attacking Farage for economic recklessness when his own credibility on the economy was in ruins? Starmer fumbled, stuttered, and delivered defensive lines that convinced no one. The room knew they had him cornered. It was no longer a debate about numbers or policies, it was about trust. And when a leader is caught breaking his word, the damage is irreversible. Worse still, the spectacle exposed Starmer's growing disconnect from ordinary people. He tried to deliver lines about his childhood, about growing up in a cost of living crisis, about knowing what it was like when a family couldn't pay the bills. But the performance rang hollow. Surrounded by heavy security, locked away in sterile venues, Starmer looked more like an actor reading a script than a leader connecting with the public. And then, as if the gods of irony wanted to prove the point, the viral clip surfaced once again, a pub landlord shouting, "That man is not allowed in my pub. Get out of my pub." That single moment, raw and unscripted, says more about Starmer's disconnect than any speech ever could. No matter how many times he repeats, "I know what it's like," the image of him being thrown out of a pub will haunt him. The most devastating blow, however, came not from the press, but from within his own party's orbit. Matthew Lazar, a former Labour advisor, admitted what many had whispered, but never said publicly. The press has been unbelievably gentle with Starmer until now. They carried him, protected him, gave him a free pass. But that era is over. What went on in that room today, Lazar confessed, was a complete reversal of where they've been up till now. For his critics, this was confirmation that the tide has turned. For his allies, it was a chilling warning. If the media has finally decided to scrutinise him with the same ferocity they once reserved for his opponents, then Starmer may not survive long enough to rebuild trust. And so the narrative is set. Starmer is not simply unpopular, he is exposed. His promises look fragile, his speeches sound hollow. His attacks on Farage backfire, the press no longer shields him, and his own allies whisper that the honeymoon is over. For a Prime Minister who promised strength and stability, the sight of him rattled, defensive and desperate is nothing short of catastrophic. The true measure of a leader isn't how they behave when times are easy, it's how they react when the walls close in, when the questions sting, when the mask slips. And for Keir Starmer, today revealed more than any policy paper or polished speech ever could. It revealed fragility, it revealed panic, it revealed a man who looks less like a prime minister and more like a placeholder, desperately clinging to power while the ground collapses beneath him. The press sensed it, the public sensed it, even his own party sensed it. And once that perception takes hold, it becomes almost impossible to shake. The sheer scale of the collapse in trust is staggering. Poll after poll shows Reform UK climbing, not just by eating away at Conservative voters, but by luring away disillusioned Labour supporters. That is the nightmare scenario Starmer's team never wanted to confront. For months, they comforted themselves with the idea that reform was a Tory problem, a threat only to the right. But the numbers tell a different story. Reform is becoming a problem for Labour too. The so-called Red Wall, the very heartland Labour lost years ago and promised to win back, is slipping further from Starmer's grasp. These are the voters who wanted authenticity, honesty, and someone who would speak their language. Instead, they see a man who dodges questions, breaks promises, and cannot step into a pub without being thrown out. This is where Starmer's downfall becomes more than a series of bad headlines. It's a story of political realignment. For decades, British politics has been defined by the battle between Labour and the Conservatives. But now, a new force is emerging, a force built on populism, frustration, and the raw anger of voters who feel ignored. Reform UK isn't just chipping away at the old order, it's threatening to replace it. And by obsessively naming Farage in speech after speech, Starmer has only accelerated this shift. He has transformed Farage from a fringe agitator into the central character of British politics, validating him with every word. The press, of course, has picked up on this. That devastating clip of Starmer repeating Nigel Farage's name again and again is now circulating endlessly online. Commentators call it embarrassing, analysts call it rattled, and the public sees it for what it is: desperation, a prime minister so consumed by his opponent that he cannot articulate his own vision. Instead of leading the national conversation, he has allowed himself to become trapped in his rival's shadow. And the brutal irony is this: the more he attacks Farage, the stronger Farage looks. This is not just a communications failure, it is a strategic collapse. When a leader gives their opponent more airtime than their own agenda, they are effectively surrendering the battlefield. Starmer may think he is undermining Farage by calling him out, but in reality, he is elevating him. Every mention reinforces Farage's relevance. Every attack makes him seem like a genuine alternative. And with reforms surging in the polls, this miscalculation could prove fatal for Labour. The voters Starmer needs the most are the very ones most likely to be swayed by Farage's message. And now, thanks to Starmer's obsession, they are hearing Farage's name louder than ever. The economic hypocrisy only deepens the wound. The press has hammered him over national insurance, over benefit caps, over the promises he abandoned. These aren't small details. These are core issues that speak directly to the livelihoods of millions. Pensioners, families, business owners, all of them hear the contradictions. All of them see the cracks. When he attacks Farage's economic plans, unfunded fantasies, they remember his own broken pledges. When he lectures about responsibility, they recall his own U-turns. And every time the press highlights these contradictions, trust erodes further. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. This is why today's press attack wasn't just painful, it was existential. It exposed the hollow foundation beneath Starmer's leadership. For months, his strength wasn't built on conviction or authenticity. It was built on the absence of scrutiny. As Matthew Larser admitted, the media went easy on him. They treated him with kid gloves. They wanted to believe in him, but that grace period is over. Now every question is sharper, every headline harsher, every promise scrutinised, and Starmer, untested in real battles, is crumbling under the weight of it. The symbolic power of the pub incident only magnifies this collapse. Politics isn't just about policy, it's about imagery. And the image of a prime minister being shouted out of a pub by an ordinary man cuts deeper than any statistic. It tells voters everything they need to know. This leader isn't one of us. He doesn't belong here. He doesn't understand us. Starmer can deliver as many staged speeches as he likes, but nothing can erase that moment. It will follow him, replayed again and again, a reminder of his disconnect. And behind the scenes, the pressure is mounting. His massive parliamentary majority, once seen as his greatest strength, is now a liability. When discontent brews within a party that large, factions form. Groups of MPs can gather, organise and push back. The two-child benefit debacle is already sparking murmurs of dissent. Add in rising fuel costs, rising taxes and the sense that Labour has no clear direction, and you have the recipe for a rebellion. Starmer may have survived the press today, but if his own MPs lose faith, he will face a revolt from within. And history shows that when a prime minister begins to lose their party, the end can come quickly. So here we are, a leader rattled by the press, haunted by his rival, rejected by voters, and facing whispers of rebellion in his own ranks. This isn't simply the worst day of his premiership, it's a turning point. A moment when the narrative shifted, when the press finally drew blood, when the mask slipped. From this point forward, every headline, every poll, every public appearance will be viewed through the lens of weakness, and once weakness is visible, it attracts predators. Rivals within his party, rivals outside, and a press that now smells blood in the water. Because no leader, no matter how strong, can survive once the whispers of rebellion begin. And today, those whispers grew louder. The very MPs who cheered his rise, who basked in the glow of his early promises, are now asking themselves the question no Prime Minister ever wants their own party to ask: is he really the one to lead us into the future? Starmer's premiership was supposed to be built on unity. After years of Labour tearing itself apart under Corbyn, he promised discipline, calm and competence, and for a while it seemed to work. His majority looked unassailable, his control appeared firm. But politics is never about numbers alone, it's about mood, it's about momentum, and right now the mood inside Labour is souring at speed. The press attacks haven't just embarrassed him, they've emboldened his critics. MPs who once stayed silent are now wondering whether his failure to connect with voters will cost them their seats. And in politics, survival always comes before loyalty. The two-child benefit fiasco is a perfect example. Starmer campaigned on protecting the cap only to wobble under pressure. For MPs representing working-class constituencies, this isn't just another broken promise. It's electoral suicide. Their constituents already feel betrayed, already feel ignored, already feel lied to. And now they see a Labour Prime Minister abandoning commitments with barely a second thought. Add to that rising energy costs, mounting economic pressure, and the perception that Starmer is more concerned with outmanoeuvring Farage than solving people's problems, and you have the makings of a full-blown rebellion. It doesn't take much for murmurs to become movements. A party with over 400 MPs can form cliques and factions faster than most leaders can stamp them out. Already there are reports of backbenchers holding informal discussions about Starmer's future. The media, always hungry for drama, will seize on these stories and amplify them. Once the question of leadership enters the bloodstream of Westminster, it rarely leaves quietly. The knives might not be out yet, but they are being sharpened. And history tells us that when a Prime Minister starts losing control of the narrative, challengers will emerge from the shadows. But Starmer's problem is bigger than just internal unrest. It's the perception of weakness that now clings to him like a shadow. For months, the media handled him with care, or almost reverence. But that era is over. Now, every press conference, every appearance, every speech will be scrutinised. Every stumble will be amplified. Every contradiction will be headline news. The press no longer fears Starmer. They smell blood. And once the media turns on a leader, it often sets the stage for their downfall. Thatcher, Blair, May, Johnson, they all discovered this the hard way. The moment the press decides you're finished, the clock starts ticking. And what makes this even more dangerous for Starmer is the rise of Nigel Farage and Reform UK. While Labour stumbles, Reform is growing. Once dismissed as a fringe movement, it is now shaping the political conversation. And here's the irony. Starmer himself has helped fuel that rise by mentioning Farage over and over, by making him the centrepiece of his speeches. He has turned a challenger with 5 MPs into the most talked about politician in the country. Reform is no longer just a thorn in the side of the Tories, it's becoming a direct threat to Labour's working class base. The very voters Starmer needs to hold on to are now looking at Farage and asking themselves whether he, not Starmer, understands their lives better. This is the nightmare scenario. A Labour leader, who is supposed to unite the left and centre, is instead driving voters toward a populist insurgency, and the more Starmer panics, the more he reinforces that narrative. Every attack on Farage only makes Farage stronger. Every policy reversal makes Starmer look weaker. Every press humiliation adds to the sense that the Prime Minister is spiralling out of control. Reform UK doesn't even need to win outright to cause chaos. They just need to peel off enough votes to fracture Labour's base and expose the party's vulnerability. And if that happens, Starmer will go down not just as a weak leader, but as the man who allowed a populist movement to break apart Labour's dominance. The wider political consequences are already being felt. Confidence in government is evaporating. Public trust, once fragile, is now collapsing. People who once tolerated Starmer's cautious, lawyerly style now see it as robotic and evasive. Pensioners, families, business owners, farmers, groups that Labour cannot afford to lose are questioning whether Starmer has any credibility left. And as Reform grows, the Conservatives smell an opportunity too. A fractured Labour vote could give the Tories a path back, even in areas they thought were lost forever. What looked like a Labour stronghold only months ago is now up for grabs. And so the political landscape shifts. The old rules no longer apply. The idea of Labour dominating with Starmer at the helm looks less certain by the day. Instead, Britain faces the prospect of something entirely new: a fractured left, a wounded Prime Minister, and a populist insurgency gaining ground. It is not just a crisis for Starmer, it is a crisis for the entire system. Because once voters decide that neither of the two main parties can be trusted, the floodgates open for alternatives. And in politics, once the flood begins, it rarely stops where you expect. For Starmer, the danger is clear. He is losing control, not only of the media narrative, not only of the public's trust, but of his own party's loyalty. The press has delivered a knockout blow, but it may only be the beginning. The real battle will come when his MPS decide whether they still believe he can win. And if they conclude he cannot, the end will come quickly. Leaders often look invincible right up until the moment they fall. And in the corridors of Westminster tonight, there are whispers that Keir Starmer's fall may have already begun. Every political career has a moment when the tide turns, when the protective walls crumble, when the aura of inevitability evaporates. For Keir Starmer, that moment has come. What unfolded today wasn't just a difficult press conference. It wasn't just a rough news cycle. It was a fundamental turning point, a shift in perception that could define the rest of his premiership and perhaps even end it sooner than anyone imagined. The image of Starmer as steady, serious and competent has been replaced by an image of weakness, panic and desperation. And once that image hardens in the public's mind, it rarely softens again. Consider how this will play out in the days to come. The headlines will be merciless. Starmer rattled, Starmer humiliated, Farage dominates, Labour in crisis. The viral clips will spread across social media, replayed thousands of times, each one reinforcing the story of a Prime Minister out of his depth. Ordinary voters who didn't even watch the press conference will see the sound bites, hear the laughter, read the headlines, and they will believe what the narrative tells them, that Starmer is finished. And perception in politics is everything. A leader who looks weak is weak. A leader who looks panicked is panicked. This is why today matters more than most people realise. Starmer is not just losing an argument with the press or with Nigel Farage. He's losing the story. And the story is what shapes everything that follows. MPs read the headlines, donors read the headlines, voters read the headlines. If the story becomes Starmer is failing, then reality will bend to fit that narrative. MPs will panic, donors will hesitate, voters will drift away. Momentum, once lost, is almost impossible to reclaim. Inside Labour, the calculation will be brutal. MPs who once backed Starmer because they believed he could win will start asking themselves a different question. Can he still deliver victory? If the answer becomes no, loyalty will crumble. Some will demand changes in strategy, others will demand changes in leadership, and the larger the party, the greater the risk of rebellion. Starmer's massive majority, once his shield, could become his greatest weakness. With so many MPs, there are plenty who can band together, organise and challenge him. And once that process begins, it rarely stops until the leader is gone. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is waiting in the wings, grinning as his name dominates every headline. He doesn't need to fight for attention anymore. Starmer has already given it to him. Farage is being elevated by the very Prime Minister who seeks to destroy him. The press, delighted by the spectacle, will keep the focus on their growing rivalry. And in that rivalry, Starmer looks like the loser. Every mention of Farage makes him stronger. Every attack from Starmer makes him more relevant. This is not a battle Starmer can win because it is being fought on his opponent's terms. And then there is the public, the ultimate jury. For months, they tolerated Starmer. Some even trusted him. But trust is fragile, and once it cracks, it collapses quickly. Pensioners wonder if they can believe his promises on benefits. Families wonder if they can trust him on the cost of living. Business owners wonder if his tax pledges will hold. And all of them, watching him stutter under the glare of the press, are left wondering whether this man is strong enough to lead Britain through crisis. When doubt enters the national consciousness, it spreads like wildfire. The symbolism of today cannot be ignored. A prime minister rattled and defensive, forced to answer for broken promises. A leader mocked by journalists, unable to escape the shadow of a rival. A man thrown out of a pub, clinging to claims of authenticity while surrounded by security. These moments matter because they capture the truth in ways statistics cannot. They tell a story of disconnect, of weakness, of failure, and that story will define him now. So where does this leave Britain? With a wounded Prime Minister, a divided Labour Party and a populist insurgency on the rise? With a press that has finally decided to bare its teeth? With a public that is increasingly sceptical, increasingly restless, increasingly hungry for something real? This is no longer just a question of Starmer's leadership. It is a question about the future of the country itself. Will Labour fracture under the weight of his failures? Will reform rise to become a permanent force in British politics? Will the Tories exploit this chaos to mount a comeback? These are the questions that now hang over Westminster. And for Keir Starmer, the reality is harsh. He may not have the time to answer them. Politics moves fast. Reputations are destroyed in days. Careers collapse in weeks. Today's knockout blow from the press may well be remembered as the moment his downfall began. He entered the room as Prime Minister. He left the room as a man exposed, weakened and humiliated. And the road back from that humiliation may not exist. The battle for the future of Britain is underway. The press has delivered the first blow. Farage is waiting to strike the second. And the public will decide the third. For Keir Starmer, the clock is ticking.